Hello there. My name is Arun Gupta and I work in the Cloud Application Foundation team at Oracle. Today I will show you how NetBeans and WebLogic Server 12c, which was recently released, can be used together to develop and deploy a Java EE6 application. Let's get started. In order to get started, you go to the main page of WebLogic that is accessible from oracle.com/weblogic. Then you can click on the downloads link here. WebLogic is also available actually as a zip distribution. It's 164 megabytes that can be used in a variety of operating systems. You download the file and then you can follow a wonderful screencast by Steve Button that explains exactly how you take the zip distribution and install it on your operating system. It also shows you exactly how do you create your own domain and get your domain started. And then eventually you take that, you shut down the server and then restart it using the scripts created in the domain. All of that is very well explained in this screencast. So once you reach that point, then we will switch to NetBeans and configure our WebLogic server in NetBeans. Now in NetBeans IDE, this is 7.1 RC2. You will go to the Services tab, right click on Servers, say Add Server. You will choose Oracle WebLogic Server, click on Next, and here you will choose the location where you have your WebLogic server pre-installed. So if you click on the Browse button, as you can see, Tools WebLogic 12c is where I have my WebLogic server pre-installed. I don't need to specify the WLS server directory. Click on Next, and then it asks me what the location of my domain directory is. So I specify the domain directory, and of course I need to specify the administrator password. Once you specify the password, you click on Finish, and now your Oracle WebLogic Server 12c is registered in the NetBeans IDE itself. You can start, stop, deploy applications to it from within the IDE itself. So with that step, let's now create our database, because we're going to be using a database. We will be creating a Java EE6 application, accessing data from the database and displaying it in different formats. So let's use MySQL for that part of it. Now once you have downloaded MySQL from mysql.com and installed it as well, you will need to download the sample database. There's a sample database that comes along with MySQL called as Sakila, which is a sample database for contains movie, actors, and similar artifacts. So once you download the sample database, you can install the database as described using this link. This blog, by the way, explains how you can create the JDBC resource for MySQL and Oracle sample databases. Even though the blog is referring to Glassfish v3, but the instructions are pretty generic. So you download the sample database, you run these two scripts, you create a user. In this case, I've created the user MySQL, grant all the privileges. Then you run the database, or actually create the database, populate the database using that user. So you specify the MySQL user here. And then the last very important thing that we would need to do is download the connector J, which is the JDBC driver for MySQL. It allows you to connect your Java applications to MySQL database. So you download the connector J, comes as a zip. So unzip it and copy the connector jar file. Now, instead of copying it to the directory specified here, you will copy it to the WebLogic domains directory, or WebLogic domains/lib directory. That's the directory that is recommended for copying any such jar files. Okay. Now, once you have database schema loaded and populated, then you can go back to NetBeans. In the databases tab, you can actually register your MySQL server, which I have pre-registered here already. Expand it, and it shows you the Sakila database here. Right click and say connect, and you specify the username, which in our case, as I said, is MySQL, and we will say to remember the password. And now our database is created. Within NetBeans, we can expand upon the database, and it shows us all the tables that exist in this database basically. Okay, with that background, now we are ready to start creating our Java EE6 applications and using all the technologies in there. Let's make our very first Java EE6 application. So go to Projects tab, right click, say New Project, choose Java Web Application, click on Next, and I'm going to call this application as Hello World. This is a simple Java EE6 application for Hello World. Click on Next. We will choose Oracle WebLogic server as our application server. This is Java EE6 web version. And for now, we just take finish. So NetBeans has this concept of conventions over configuration. So if you can specify, if you take the convention, then you can go as is, take the defaults, works out of the box. If there's a need, you can always override it later. So for now, we have created our very boilerplate Java EE6 application. In order to get it running on WebLogic, we will go to WebInf. This is a WebLogic specific deployment descriptor. We will disable something called as fast swap. This feature is typically required for production usages. We don't need it for development purposes here. So we just make it false for now. Right click on the project and I'm going to say run. As you will see, this is going to start my Oracle WebLogic server. Once the server is running, then if we go back to our Hello World tab, it tries to deploy the project. And once the project is deployed, it shows us a simple response, which is our Hello World, which is a simple index.jsp file. Okay, so now let's build upon this application. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to create a JPA entity. I want to access some values from the database. So I'm going to create a JPA entity in order to access those values from the database. Right click, new, and I want to create entity classes from database. And no data source exists. This is a brand new installation of WebLogic. So we're going to create a new data source. I'm going to call it as jdbc/sakila. This is the same sample database that we installed earlier. We use a pre-configured database connection. Click on OK. And it automatically shows me what tables exist in that database as we saw earlier. So let's say I want to generate a JP entity for the table actor. So I click on add here. These are the selected tables. If there are any relations, they will be automatically picked up as well. Click on next. Now here I need to specify, first of all, you see database table, what are the corresponding generated class name, project, and location that we want everything to be in the source packages. Now, of course, we need to specify a specific package name. So let's say entities is where we want to keep our JP entities. I want to generate some named query annotations, and we will use that later in the project. So we will take a look at that. We will also generate jax-rs annotations that allows these JP entities to be easily used for web services. We'll see that later. And of course, we want a persistence unit. Just following NetBeans philosophy, click on finish, take all the defaults. So now I have my entities created. Let's take a look at it. So if I expand entities, look at the actor class here. And you can see, it's JPA entity. It has XML root element that allows this class to be converted to XML or other interpretations. These are different named queries, a convenient name with the JPQL specified here just to get you started. And as you can see, it also has bean validation constraints, which is a new specification in the Java EE6 platform. So you specify the constraints on the bean, and then they're honored by the JPA layer. And the constraints could be not null, which is a predefined constraint, or in this case, a size, for example, between 1 and 45 characters. And you can also have custom constraints as well. So we'll not dig into that in this particular screencast though. Now, in order to use this entity class, we would need an EJB. Now, one of the biggest improvements in the Java EE6 platform is the ability to have EJB be packaged in a WAR file. And let's take a look how that works. So I right click here and I say new, and I want to create a new session bean. And let's say I want to call it as actor session bean. And in this case, I want to put it into the package, say org.samples. Okay, this is my stateless session bean. Click on finish, and here comes my stateless session bean. Just a Pojo, not implementing any interface. It's a stateless bean. Very simplified definition of EJB in the Java EE6 platform. Now, in this EJB, we need to access database. And how do we access database? We inject persistence context, which will give us entity manager and a variable. Let's resolve all the imports. So click on the yellow bulb here. Now we want to pick Java X persistence entity manager, not something else. And we need to resolve entity persistence context as well. So resolve that as well too. Let's add a method. It's going to be a public method, which will return a list of actor. And let's call that method as get actors. And how we're going to use it? Say em. This is our entity manager, and see how code completion works very seamlessly. I'm going to use create named query. Now the name is going to be the named query annotation that was generated for us in the actor class. So let's go there and pick actor.findAll, copy it and paste it. And then this is going to return a result list. Okay, and we will return it, but we need to typecast it. This is going to give us a list of actor. Let's resolve all the imports. I'm going to use a quick shortcut, and imports are resolved. So that's our EJB now. Okay, now where do we use this EJB? Well, we will need a servlet or some other page where we can actually invoke this EJB. So let's do that. Now here in the org.samples, I'm going to right click, and I will say now I want a new servlet. So let's create a new servlet, and let's say this is only a test servlet, and it's going into org.samples package. Now let's say, just for fun, click on finish, or click on next actually. We can add the information to deployment descriptor. Now the traditional way of creating a servlet is specifying URL patterns, etc. in the web.xml. In Java EE6, you don't need to do that. So if we click on finish, now this is how my generated class looks like. All the information typically required in web.xml is specified in the annotation right here itself. URL patterns, servlet name, etc. Okay. Now here I need to inject my EJB, and my EJB name is actor session bean and a variable name here, of course. Let's resolve this import too. And then in this servlet, what I'll do is I will print, say, invoke bean. Well, first of all, I need to go back to my bean here and save the file here. Then I come back to my servlet, and then I say show me get actors. And now I can save the file. Now the project will be automatically deployed for me if I go back here and I say show me test servlet. Voila. So we see an output from the servlet. Notice we were not explicitly deploying the project by ourselves. The project was automatically getting deployed, thereby giving you a big productivity boost. Well, the output is pretty ugly, but we can fix it. So we go back to NetBeans, take a look at actor class. Down here we have a toString method. So let's update this a little bit. So all we want to do, for example, print first name and maybe their last name too. So last name. So we save the file here, go back to the browser and refresh the URL here, and there you go. We got a complete list of actors that are in the database table. Okay, perfect. Now this output from the servlet, although handy, but not very fancy. So let's take a look at some of the improvements that are being made in the Java server faces in the Java EE6 platform. So back in my IDE, I'm going to right click on the project and say properties, and I can say frameworks, and I will say enable the JSF framework for me. So I click on it, say OK. Now again, convention over configuration. I just take all the defaults, click on OK, and it automatically generates a index.xhtml file for me. So now if I go back to the browser and I say faces/index.xhtml, it shows hello from Facelets. Okay, so let's try to modify this page. One big feature of JSF 2.0 is that it uses facelets for templating. Now, facelets allows you to specify your view in XHTML and CSS, whereas all the backing business logic sits in the backing bean. And we'll talk about that backing bean in a second. But let's try to create a template of the page and see how the index.xhtml can use that template first. So we right click here and say other. We choose Java Server Faces. We say Facelets template. Click on next. I'm going to call it as template. Check the default, just one header and a space for content. Click on finish. There are a bunch of other templates that exist as well. And of course, you can create your own because it's purely using CSS. So click on finish. So here comes my template.xhtml. And as you can see, it's pure XHTML using CSS and just simple divs. Now in my template.xhtml, I can start playing around with the code here. So I could say, for example, put some HTML tags here. And I could say WebLogic server 12c is Java EE6 compliant. Okay. Now here I could delete my index.xhtml and regenerate it. So go to other, Java Server Faces, Facelets template client this time. So click on next, and I'm going to call it as index. And of course I need to choose which template it requires. So click on more here. Choose the template that we just created and select on finish. So here comes my index.xhtml regenerated. So let's save all the files for a second. And if I go back to my browser and if I refresh my page, it looks like top and content. So if we go back and look at index.xhtml, it indeed has top and content, two sections. So what's the point of having a template? Well, let's take a look. So I delete this code from here. Let's say I say pick the top section from the template. So I save the file here, go back to the browser, refresh it. Now I see the top section automatically coming from the template. So the idea is your template can define the real template, top, bottom, side, etc. And your client pages can actually specify how the client should look like or the actual content should look like. So in this case, this is coming from the template. And let's see what we're going to put in the content now. So for that, let's go back to our IDE. And what I want to do is I want to use my session bean that I created into my JSF page. Now that's one of the big improvements in the Java EE6 platform. Now, typically you would take a JSF page, have a managed bean as a backing bean, then from there you will invoke an EJB. With Java EE6, you can have an EJB right as the backing bean for a JSF page. Let's take care of that first. So, how is that possible? Now, this is my actor session bean. I can add a single annotation here called as add named. Once I add that annotation, that means this EJB is now available for injection into an expression language. Let's resolve this import. And of course, I need to enable context and dependency injection in my application as well. So I can right click on my project, say new, say other, and I go to context and dependency injection, pick CDI configuration file, next, and it generates a very boilerplate beans.xml file. No content in there, so I can just close the file for now. But the idea is the presence of this beans.xml in the webinf directory ensures that all the files are, all the POJOs in the war file are available for injection. Now the added annotation at named makes sure that this EJB is also available for expression language injection. So let's save the file here. Now I can go back to my index.xhtml and start adding some content here. So I want to say display this in a data table, and I want to call it a value, and this value would be say actor session bean, and I want to get the list of actors from here, and my variable would be, let's say, A. Okay, and see how my code completion and automatically my XML namespace was added as well. That's the idea of productivity boost. So my closing tag, now I can specify h colon column. Now in the h colon column, all I want to display is actor dot say first name. Okay, see how code completion really helps me to be really productive. So save the file here, and we go back to the browser, and I refresh the page here, and there you go. We have the list of actors that was displayed in a servlet, in a string-based format. Now is displayed nicely formatted over here. Okay. Now let's take a look at another technology that was newly added to the Java EE6 platform, which is jax-rs. So let's see what NetBeans provides us in that direction. So back in NetBeans IDE, I could right-click here, and now since I already have entity classes generated for me, I could ask NetBeans to generate RESTful resources for those entity classes. Right-click, new. I could say RESTful Web Services from entity classes. Once I do that, the wizard shows up for me. I can say pick the entity class, move it to the selected entity class, click on next. It asks me a package in which it's going to generate the classes in order to expose my JPA entity classes as RESTful resources. Click on finish. In our application, we need a base URL from which the RESTful resources are exposed. So the URL, in our case, let's make it as web resources, for example, and this will also create the default Jersey servlet adapter and add it to the web.xml. And we don't want the reference implementation classes to be added to the project class path because they're already provisioned by the server. So let's click on OK here. And if we look at our service package here, you can see abstract facade is created and actor facade rest is created for us. So if we look at it, you see that this is a very stateless. This is a stateless bean, by the way. It's exposed as this path. Let's say we can change the path here. I want to expose this RESTful entity at a simple path called as actor, and my actor facade rest extends from this particular class, and it has all the HTTP verbs implemented by default. So post, put, delete, get, and for get, of course, there are different variations. But let's try to access this resource and see how we can use it. Now in this web XML, you can see that this is the web resources URL, which is our base URL for all the RESTful resources. There is also a portable way of doing it. This becomes non-portable because it's specifying an implementation specific servlet. There's also a portable way, as I was talking about, by which you can use add application path annotation on a class. So back in my actor facade rest, let's say I save it here now, and if I go back to the browser, then I can say web resources, that's my base URL, and I could say actor. We get a URL error. So how do we fix that error? So go back to the browser IDE, right click on the project, say properties, and in the libraries, let's make sure we are not including the Jersey 1.8 libraries because these libraries are already provisioned for us. So click on OK. The project automatically gets deployed for us. We go back to the browser and we refresh the URL. Well, the project is still getting deployed. We can actually monitor the progress here. And here is the bindings and everything is happening. Once that is done, now we refresh the URL, and here you go. We see the complete list of actors now exposed as a RESTful resource. And this is coming in an XML representation. Now, if I go back in my IDE, and I take a look at the get method. So this is the method that gets invoked when it's accessed using HTTP GET. And here is saying the resource, actually this method, find all. This is the default method that gets invoked because we're not specifying a particular IDE. Now, if we don't give a sub resource, which is in this case, this method gets invoked, find all. We are exposing both XML and JSON in this case. Now I can say let's only expose the JSON representation. So now when the project gets deployed again, I go back to the browser, refresh the same URL, and now the whole thing is exposed as a JSON resource. Same thing, I can go back here. Now this is a method where I'm specifying a sub resource, which is show me the RESTful resource for a actor or an actor. So here I could say 1, for example, and in this case is Penelope Guinness. So the details for that particular actor shows up. And now by default is XML. Same thing. I can go back here, change the representation of the output format, go back here, refresh it, and now it's actually in a JSON format. So in this short screencast, I showed you how easy it is to create a Java EE6 application using NetBeans and deploy it on WebLogic Server 12c. Now WebLogic provides the full functionality of Java EE6. So what I showed you is a very, very small subset of functionality, but you can definitely deploy all of your Java EE6 applications very well over there. So let me leave you with some references. You can always stay connected with us on the Twitter handle. You can find tons of videos about WebLogic on the YouTube channel. You can also connect us on Facebook. And all the details about WebLogic are anyway available at oracle.com/weblogic. Thank you.